Welcome back, everybody. Excited to jump into a new deep dive today. This time you've given us some really interesting research on the connection between symphonics and Fa Jin.
It is a pretty unique pairing.
Yeah, and we're going to be using the paper Symphonics and Fa Jin, the interplay of energy, harmony, and resonance as a jumping off point to see, how these two things connect. So we're going to be exploring how this modern systems thinking framework of symphonics, how it might actually be enhanced by the ancient wisdom of Fa Jin, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is that explosive energy release that you see in martial arts, like Tai Chi.
Yeah, and it really is fascinating how the deeper you go with both of these, the more you realize that they're both about far more than just the mechanics.
Right.
They really offer a way of seeing the world,
I like that.
a way of understanding how energy flows, not just in the physical realm, but in all systems.
That's a great point. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit, starting with symphonics. I think I get the basic idea, right? It's about viewing the world as this interconnected web of systems, all resonating and influencing each other, like instruments in an orchestra.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does that actually translate into practical applications?
So think about it this way. Imagine you're trying to understand the success of a company. A traditional approach might just look at things like their financial reports, their marketing strategies, or, how their employees are performing.
Yep.
But all in isolation. Symphonics encourages us to see how all of these elements are actually interconnected, how they influence each other, how they're contributing to the overall harmony of the organization, or disharmony for that matter.
That's interesting. So it's less about focusing on these individual parts and more about the relationships between the parts.
Precisely. Symphonics is about seeing that whole picture, recognizing that a change in one area of a system can create, ripple effects throughout the entire organization. It's a much more holistic way of analyzing and then ultimately improving any system.
Yeah, okay. So we're talking about interconnectedness of everything with symphonics.
Hmm.
Now let's shift gears over to Fa Jin. We've all seen those incredible displays of power in martial arts movies where it seems like, somebody barely touches somebody and sends them flying. But the paper that you sent over suggests that there's a lot more to it than just what we see on the surface.
Absolutely. Fa Jin is not about brute strength.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a deep internal harmony and then being able to express that harmony outwards, in a focused burst of energy.
So it's almost like, I don't know, it makes me think of like a wave, building in the ocean. It gathers all this energy and then it crests and releases that energy in a powerful surge.
That's a great analogy.
But I'm curious, how is that kind of power even possible? What's actually happening inside the body to allow that to happen?
Well, that's where the six harmonies come in.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental principle in internal martial arts like Tai Chi. It's really key to understanding how Fa Jin works. Essentially, the six harmonies are a series of alignments, both physical and energetic, that allow for this smooth and efficient flow of energy throughout the body.
So it's not just about, being physically strong. There's this internal component to it as well.
Absolutely. Think of it this way. The external harmonies, those are all about aligning the body's structure. So shoulders with hips, elbows with knees, wrists with ankles. It's about creating this series of interconnected levers that allow force to be transmitted efficiently through the body.
So making sure that all the parts are working together smoothly.
Yes, but then here's where it gets even more interesting. The internal harmonies are all about aligning your mind, your intention, your breath with your physical movements. And what this does is it creates a kind of internal resonance that amplifies the power generated by those external harmonies.
Okay, so with all this talk about internal harmonies, I'm wondering, how does this all relate back to symphonics? Is there some kind of connection between those internal harmonies and the way that we think about systems?
There's a profound connection. In symphonics, we aim to create harmony within a system by aligning goals, resources, execution. In Fa Jin, we're doing the same thing, but it's on a personal level. We're aligning our intentions, our energy, our actions to create this harmonious flow that maximizes our effectiveness.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's almost like the microcosm mirroring the macrocosm. The principles that govern the flow of energy, within our bodies can also be applied to the flow of energy in larger systems.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of Fa Jin, the concept of energy return.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
All right. So the idea here is that the energy that you express in a Fa Jin strike it doesn't just disappear.
Right.
It's not simply about expending force. Instead, that energy is channeled back to your center, ready to be used again. It's like a wave that crashes on the shore and then flows back out to sea, gathering energy for the next surge.
Wait, so you're saying the energy is not lost, it's recycled? That sounds almost supernatural.
It might sound that way, but it's actually rooted in a very deep understanding of physics and energy dynamics. Think of a bouncing ball. Each time it hits the ground, it doesn't just lose all of its energy, right?
Right.
Instead, it compresses, it stores that energy, and then it releases it in that rebound. Fa Jin operates on a similar principle. It uses the elasticity of the body, the coordination of movement to recycle energy.
Wow. That's a really helpful image. And I'm starting to see how this idea of energy return really ties back to symphonics. If we think about organizations or systems as having their own kind of energy flow,
Yeah.
it would make sense to find ways to recycle and reuse that energy rather than just letting it dissipate.
Absolutely. That's one of the key insights that these two seemingly disparate disciplines share. They both point to the importance of understanding the cyclical nature of energy and finding ways to work with those cycles to maximize effectiveness.
This is already blowing my mind, and I have a feeling we've just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to unpack when it comes to the connections between symphonics and Fa Jin.
Indeed, and as we delve deeper, I think we'll start to see how these concepts can be applied not just to martial arts or systems thinking, but to all aspects of our lives.
I can't wait. But for now, I think we've given our listener plenty to chew on. We've kind of explored the basics of symphonics and Fa Jin, touched on the concept of the six harmonies, and started to see how these ideas can even be applied to understanding energy flow in any system.
A great start, and as we continue our dip dive, we'll uncover even more surprising connections and practical applications that can help us all live more harmoniously and effectively in the world.
As we're talking about all of this, I can't help but wonder if there are any practical examples of this energy return in action outside of like the martial arts context. I mean, it's a really cool concept, but can we actually see it playing out in other systems?
Absolutely. Think about a well-designed building.
Okay.
A lot of modern architecture incorporates principles of passive heating and cooling.
Right.
So they're using natural airflow, sunlight to regulate the temperature. Instead of just pumping in energy to heat or cool the space, the building is designed to capture and reuse the energy that's already present in the environment.
Oh, that's a great example. So it's like the building itself is practicing Fa Jin, capturing and redirecting energy to, achieve its goal of maintaining that comfortable temperature. It's not just about like brute force energy consumption. It's about working with the existing energy flows.
Precisely. And that same principle can be applied to so many other systems. Take ecosystems, for instance. A healthy ecosystem is all about this energy flow and recycling. You have plants capturing energy from the sun, herbivores eating the plants, predators eating the herbivores, and then decomposers break down all the organic matter, returning nutrients to the soil, and then the cycle begins anew.
Right. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's all about maximizing efficiency, minimizing waste by creating these closed loops of energy exchange. And I bet we could even apply this kind of thinking to how we manage our own personal energy, right?
You're exactly on the right track. Think about the concept of rest and recovery.
Yeah.
We often view rest as simply a time to recharge, to replenish our energy reserves. But what if we looked at it through the lens of Fa Jin as an opportunity to actually capture and recycle energy?
I'm not sure I'm following. How does rest become a way to capture energy?
Well, imagine a Tai Chi practitioner performing a slow flowing movement. They're not just expending energy, they're also cultivating this sense of internal calm and focus.
Yeah.
That calm, that centeredness is a form of energy in itself. And when we rest effectively, we're essentially doing the same thing. We're allowing our minds and bodies to settle, to release tension, to gather a different kind of energy that can then be used for more active pursuits.
So it's almost like we're shifting from a mode of energy expenditure to a mode of energy cultivation.
Yeah.
We're not just resting, we're actively gathering and refining our energy.
Precisely. And this is where those internal harmonies that we talked about earlier become so important. Remember, the internal harmonies are all about aligning our mind, our intention, and our breath. And when we master those internal harmonies, even something as simple as taking a deep breath can become a way to cultivate and direct energy.
This is starting to feel really empowering. Like we have a lot more control over our energy levels than we might realize. But it also makes me wonder, are there any common pitfalls that people fall into when they're trying to apply these principles? The paper you sent mentioned something about overemphasizing mechanics and ignoring harmonies. Can you explain what that means?
Of course. Think about someone who's learning a new martial art form. They might get so caught up in memorizing the steps, the physical techniques, that they forget about that internal component,
Right.
that cultivation of energy and awareness that's really essential for true mastery.
It's like they're focusing on the external form without understanding the internal essence that gives the form its power.
Exactly. And the same thing can happen when we try to apply symphonics to, organizations. We can get so fixated on the metrics, the processes, that we forget about the human element, the need for alignment and purpose to truly motivate and inspire people.
So it's not just about optimizing systems, it's about creating systems that resonate with to the people within them.
Precisely. And that brings us right back to the importance of those internal harmonies. In Fa Jin, you need both the physical alignment of the external harmonies, A and D, the mental and energetic alignment of those internal harmonies to really generate true power. And in symphonics, you need to consider the needs and aspirations of the individuals within the system, not just the efficiency of the system itself.
It's a powerful reminder that we can't ignore the human element in any system that we're trying to understand or improve. But how do we actually find that balance between the internal and the external, between the mechanics and the essence? It seems like a pretty delicate dance.
It is a delicate dance, and like any dance, it takes practice. It's about cultivating a heightened awareness of both our internal state, A and D, the external environment, and then learning to move gracefully between the two.
So it's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding a way to integrate them, to create a seamless flow between the inner and outer worlds.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's really the essence of both Fa Jin and symphonics. It's about finding that sweet spot where effort meets ease, where structure meets flow, where the individual resonates harmoniously with that larger system.
This is all starting to feel incredibly profound, but I also have a feeling we're just scratching the surface here.
You're absolutely right. And as we continue our deep dive, we'll start to explore the philosophical underpinnings of these concepts, which I think will open up even more possibilities for understanding how they can be applied to our lives.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What kind of philosophical depths are we talking about here? Because so far, this has all been incredibly practical and grounded, but I can sense there's like a whole other layer we haven't even touched yet. All right, so we're back and ready to dive into those philosophical depths you mentioned. I'm excited to see how these like practical ideas about energy and harmony connect to something bigger.
Well, let's start with the concept of yin and yang, a fundamental principle in Taoist philosophy that's really deeply intertwined with both Fa Jin and symphonics. Have you ever noticed how those seemingly opposite forces, like yin and yang, are actually interdependent?
Yeah.
They're constantly interacting and transforming into one another.
You mean like how darkness can't exist without light, or how, strength finds its meaning in the face of weakness? Yeah, I've always found that idea fascinating, but I'm curious how that relates to what we've been talking about.
Well, think back to that wave analogy we've been using to describe Fa Jin.
Okay.
The wave rises, that's yang, the active, expansive energy, but then it crests and falls back, and that's yin, the receptive, yielding energy. And it's that interplay, that constant cycle between the two that allows the wave to keep moving, to keep expressing its power.
So it's not about choosing one over the other, but about understanding that they both have, their place, their purpose in the overall flow.
Exactly, and that same principle applies to symphonics. A healthy system needs both stability and change, structure and flexibility. It's about finding that dynamic balance between those forces of yin and yang, allowing them to work together to create a harmonious whole.
This is really starting to click for me. It's like we're seeing this universal principle at play, this dance between opposites that's essential for like creation, for movement, for life itself. But how do we actually apply this wisdom to our own lives? It seems pretty abstract.
It may seem abstract at first, but it has very practical implications. Think about how we often approach challenges in our lives. We tend to meet them head on with force, with this push, push, push mentality.
Yeah.
But what if instead we tapped into the wisdom of yin and yang? What if we learned to yield when necessary, to find those points of least resistance, to work with the natural flow of energy rather than always trying to force our way through?
Hmm. That's an interesting thought. It's like we're so conditioned to think that strength means, you know, always pushing forward, but maybe there's a different kind of strength in knowing when to step back, when to allow things to unfold naturally.
Exactly. And that's where Fa Jin and Symphonics offer such a powerful perspective. They remind us that true strength actually lies in harmony, in alignment, in working with those natural rhythms of life rather than against them.
Okay, that makes sense. But it also raises another question for me. If Fa Jin is all about cultivating this internal harmony, this alignment of, mind, body, and energy, what happens when those things are out of sync?
Hmm.
You know what happens when we're feeling stressed, scattered, overwhelmed? Does that mean we've lost our ability to access that power?
That's a great question, and it highlights a really crucial point. Even the most skilled Tai Chi master experiences those moments of imbalance. The key is to recognize those moments, to acknowledge them without judgment, and then to use the principles of Fa Jin and Symphonics to gently guide ourselves back into alignment.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about having the tools and awareness to, navigate those inevitable moments of disharmony.
Precisely. Think of it like a musician tuning an instrument.
Okay.
They listen carefully for any notes that are out of tune, and then they make those subtle adjustments to bring everything back into harmony. We can do the same thing with our own internal state. We can use techniques like mindfulness, breath work, or movement to help us recalibrate, to find that sense of centeredness and flow again.
This is all starting to feel incredibly empowering. Like we have so much more agency than we realize when it comes to shaping our own energy, our own experience of the world.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of exploring these concepts. They offer us not just a way of understanding the world, but a way of living more consciously, more skillfully, more harmoniously within it.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. We've gone from exploring the mechanics of symphonics and Fa Jin to uncovering these kind of like profound philosophical insights about, energy and harmony and the dance between yin and yang. I have to say, I'm feeling pretty inspired right now.
I'm glad to hear that, and I hope you'll continue exploring these ideas, experimenting with them in your own life. Maybe try a Tai Chi class or spend some time in nature, just observing the flow of energy all around you. See what resonates with you, what sparks your curiosity, and let that guide your journey.
That's fantastic advice. And who knows what other hidden potentials we might unlock along the way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. And remember, the exploration doesn't end here. This is just the beginning.